Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We are live. This is the Postgraduate Info Series. And if everybody or anybody is catching us live, thank you so much for tuning in. I like to give it just a couple minutes to just do introductions, but my name is Sally Traore Ualaka. I am the founder of Resi Prep. It is a program where my focus is just to help make the connection between prospective candidates and information a little bit more seamless and easy so that you guys are more comfortable with a rather convoluted process of applying for either a fellowship or a residency or even pursuing non-traditional paths. And so, if you're joining us live and can hear us, I always love it when people tell us that they can hear us. Our guest tonight, I'm really, really excited that he said yes and he could join us. I love it when the fellowship folks take time out of their busy schedule at this time of the year to come and engage with me. So I really, really appreciate you being here, Razak. I don't do bios because I love it for everybody to hear directly from you. Welcome to the Postgraduate Info Series. Can you please introduce yourself for everybody watching?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me. My name is Razaq Salau. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and currently I'm a USC fellow at AbbVie. So currently I'm at the Allergan site in Irvine, California.
Mm.
And yeah, so I'm working on regulatory affairs.
Oh, California. Well, that's a shift from Baltimore.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when it came to just moving in general, I was of the idea that I would have a serious culture shock almost. But it was kind of
Yeah,
like little things in general were just like the things that were different because I've been
yeah,
to California before, so I kind of like already had like an idea of like what it would be like, and
yeah.
just the idea of coming back for a fellowship, was like something I could really take advantage of.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you stayed open. So we will get an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. Did you always know that you were going to do a postgraduate training? And was it always clear to you that it would be industry? Or did you have like a moment where it was like, oh, I definitely want to do postgraduate and it's going to be fellowship? Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I think like just thinking about like going way back to like when I was an undergrad, right? I kind of
Mm,
had like the straight path where I knew that I wanted to go into pharmacy school and just be a pharmacist in general.
yeah,
Now, granted, if this was like maybe my sophomore year or like my junior year in undergrad, I probably would have said that I wanted to go more so into the hospital route, mainly
got
because like, when I was in my sophomore year, I did a internship. Well, not an internship, but I was a technician for CVS. And I
gotcha.
kinda knew, like, or during that period that, retail wasn't really, like, my thing, and
Yeah.
I kinda wanted to go, like, see what other options were around, so I knew, like, hospital was, like, the next thing that was
Mhm.
going on, and so I thought about that for some time, but also just trying to research and, like, talk to people who were in, like, pharmacy school already on, like, the
Yeah,
different paths, and so industry was something that, of course, I heard about through word of mouth. Everybody was, like, raving about industry, about it being the next big thing,
yeah.
and I think from there, that really piqued my interest, of course, because it was like, something that I hadn't heard about like when I was an undergrad.
Mhm.
And just coming like into pharmacy school and learning more about it, I think what really helped me like know that industry was that pathway for me was when
Mhm.
I started to comparing it to things that, I like to do like on a daily basis. So like for
Mhm.
me, that one thing I would say is basketball and like, just sports in general. Like the way that I was able to like, think about and relate industry essentially to like sports in general, that kind of like sold it for me right there that, this is the path that I want to go on to. And, just from attending IPHO,
Yeah.
the different organizations that, talk about industry and have people in industry,
Mhm.
and then just, like, getting my own experiences, like, during pharmacy school, just let me know, like, that I should go the route of doing a postdoc fellowship as a way to, like, continue to, like, build that foundation and my knowledge of industry, and one day, of course, pursue a career in it. So
That's awesome. That's great. And you mentioned like a few different things. I absolutely we're going to touch on at different junctures, but it just sounds like you kind of had an idea but stayed open and explored,
mm,
tried community, basically like trial by fire. You went to community and you were like, "No, that's not really the thing for me." And
mhm.
then found something that kind of aligned with your interests. I think that's really important. And I think regulatory affairs, can you tell us what that is? So I want you to picture like the first year student pharmacist who's going to come across this, and it's all they know it's that pharmaceutical industry is a path, but they have no idea what this functional area is. What exactly is regulatory?
Yeah, I would say like regulatory in general is when you're in that position, you're essentially in charge of, you know, showing to the agencies who are a part of like approving drugs and biologics and so forth that your drug or biologic or even a medical device is
Yeah.
safe, effective, and essentially trying to provide like a submission or an application to show, to give that evidence as to why this drug should be marketed to like people in like the
Yeah.
drug at the pharmacies. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, I kind of like think of it almost like lawyer work, essentially. Like you're essentially the one like providing that evidence to show like why this is like ideal for the market. And then
Yeah.
you have like the agencies like the FDA, Health Canada, even like European Medicines Agency, like trying to be the judge essentially to show, to see like going through the application, like what is it about this drug that actually like works. So
Yeah.
pretty much that's like a general consensus of it. Now, of course, like going more into like what like the day to day is like, you
Yeah.
know, you're going to be doing a lot of like, you're going to be doing like a lot of like paperwork, like a
Yeah.
lot of reading, of course. You're going to be a part of like managing the submissions. So managing the applications, that are involved in providing that proof to those health agencies.
Yeah.
Provide updates on like safety, efficacy, things of that nature, to essentially just show that it can be marketed, and
Yeah.
giving those health agencies as well like the updates when, let's say, a drug is approved or like a device is approved.
Yeah.
Of course, want to have updates to see if like anything has been changed, if there's
Mm.
new updates in terms of like safety.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty much those are like the core responsibilities in regulatory affairs. And also just with it, you have a lot of meetings as well where you can interact with the different like functional areas. So like,
Yeah.
people have heard of like medical affairs, clinical
Right.
development. You're essentially that liaison that's able to interact with all of them. Marketing is another area where you can also like get a lot of exposure and a lot of interactions with. And so,
Absolutely.
that really like stood out to me as well, being able
Mhm.
to essentially get a taste essentially of like all the different areas as one,
Yeah.
role as well. And so I kind of like that, how like when I think about regulatory affairs too, it's kind of like an all around aspect in order to have
Mhm.
that experience.
That's great. And I think like as I'm listening to you describing all of the different things, first of all, huge responsibility. Like
Yeah.
as I'm listening to you, I'm like, okay, first of all, huge responsibility and making sure that all of those regulatory standards are met and that all of the paperwork and everything that should be submitted is submitted. But it sounds like there's a lot of cross-functional collaboration involved. Like you're engaging with not just the people in your little bubble, but you're collaborating with other people as well at the different like junctures during different projects. How has that been? I think like a lot of people underestimate this transition period of when you go from being a student to now you're going to work. Like
Hmm.
it's training,
Yeah.
but it's work, right?
That's
So
my term, training.
it's training, but it's work. Like you're going to work and like all the stuff you're describing. This is meaningful, important work that you're showing up to do every day.
Hmm.
So I'm always curious to know like what that transition period, like what that has been like for you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been like an adjustment. Like when I
Yeah.
think about school, it's kind of like you think about how let's say you have a test or like have an assignment due,
Mhm.
and you have to think about like, the fact that you might make a mistake. And if you do make a mistake, it'll be okay. You can be able to learn from it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Being like in this field of pharma and just being in regulatory in general, and of course like in any functional area that you're going to go into,
Mhm.
the responsibility that you have is like, very high, where like
Yeah.
you essentially have to make sure that, you want to try to, minimize the mistakes like as much
Mhm.
as possible. And
Yeah.
because at that point, you're thinking about the fact that, you're working like for an actual like billion-dollar company, you know,
Yeah.
you're working for this billion-dollar company, so
Yeah.
everything that you do will be traced back to you. So it's like you
Yeah.
gotta make sure that like, the room for error is very little to none, right?
Mhm.
Just what like has helped me, of course, is just always like checking in with
Yeah.
my mentor. So like, for every fellow, I'm sure like they have a preceptor or a mentor assigned to them. And so they're going to be, of course, like your direct point of contact or whoever else
Yeah.
you're working on a project with. And just like essentially like from those experiences, I always say like if I'm given a project or something, I always like, you know, once I'm close to being done, I check
Yeah.
it to see like, hey, is this like, does this look good? What do you recommend like I do to make it better if
Yeah.
necessary? And chances are, they'll say like, it looks good, and they'll just give you recommendations and so forth.
Mhm.
So I think just having that shift in the amount of responsibility and understanding that you can't really make too much like errors, or like you
Yeah.
have to make sure that like the work that you're doing is impacting like on a global scale. Just have to
Yes.
make sure that you're just being diligent with your work. And I think that's just like the key transition, is understanding like the level of diligency that you have to go forth and do.
100%. And I think that, like, those of us that did residency, we like to think that we were the ones that were tossed into a huge world of responsibility because the patient is right there.
Mhm.
And there's so much anxiety that comes with that. Like, I can remember the first time I told a nurse that it's okay that she can crush a pill.
Mhm.
I was scared out of my mind because I don't know why, but I was, like, actually surprised that she took my yes and, like, she took off to go crush the pill, and I was like, "Oh my god." Like, when I tell people that they can do things, they do it. They
Mhm.
trust my expertise, and that sense of responsibility, it could really be intimidating and jarring sometimes, but I think what you're talking about is a really interesting angle because your responsibility is global. It's
Mhm.
there's like a global implication. Like you said, it's a $1 billion company. There's like all this responsibility. So I think that you bring up a really great point in relying on the mentorship and the support that's around you to help you find that balance. Like, diligence is the only way to go, but also like not letting that get the best of you. So it could really be crippling, because I see it as a preceptor now. I see students get crippled by that fear of making a mistake and they don't get started. That's awesome. Great job, like, just recognizing and using your network, I mean, like, your support system to
Mhm.
navigate that. So you're at AbbVie. Can you share a little bit about your program for anyone who's maybe interested, who's still looking to see what's available this year? Is the application, are they open? Share a little bit with us about your company.
Yeah, of course. So AbbVie, of course, is known headquartered in Chicago, of course, but they have
Mhm.
locations in California. So like I work with the aesthetics, Allergan aesthetics team. So like
Okay,
they focus on their primary biologic, which is Botox. So like
gotcha,
that's like the key thing that I work on, but also like in the medical devices as well. And
gotcha,
just like in general, talking about like the fellowship, it's through University of Southern California. And
gotcha.
so typically what the unique thing about a lot of USC fellowships are that they are 1-year fellowships. Most of them are 1-year
Mm,
fellowships, particularly
gotcha,
the ones in AbbVie, and then like a couple other sites as well in California.
gotcha,
And so essentially like areas that, fellows can go into, or like candidates can go into, can include like reg affairs. Well,
gotcha.
actually, let me retract that, because my position actually sadly isn't recruiting. But like in terms of
Oh.
in terms of like other areas, there's med affairs, there's clinical
Mhm.
development, there's also like areas for PhDs to, of course, like get experience into, whether it's research opportunities as part
Yeah.
of fellowships. And, all of these can be found through the USC website as well, in terms of like the different fellowships, and then also the brochure uh,
Yeah.
for the fellowships that are open. So,
I like that.
it's definitely been a great experience, because what USC has allowed as well is, you know, one, they offer like fellowships,
Mm.
but also they also offer like classes as well where you can, work on
Mm.
professional development, or like
Yeah.
let's say you want to get a certificate, you're able to do that as well, as
Mhm.
a way to help strengthen like, your candidacy for when you want to apply for a position. If you think like the courses that they have available are good for you,
Yeah.
then you're able to take that to essentially, talk about that in like interviews and
Yeah.
apply that to like your day to day. So, you know.
That's amazing. No, that's a really unique feature for the program, that they have those opportunities for the fellows to pursue those professional development certifications if they want them. So that's a unique feature. So a lot of candidates, like one of the main things on their mind is, how do I get where you are now? What can you share with them about your journey and some things that you think really helped you along the way to get one of these coveted spots?
I think one of the key things is just, of course, like, just doing your research. I think like that may seem like, like the typical answer, but like I can't stress that enough. Like you
Yeah.
gotta definitely do your research. And I think I just mean that from the perspective of knowing, the type of programs that are available. So like, USC, but of course you have, a lot of the different programs that are within like New Jersey and Boston areas.
Yeah.
And there's also like seeing the companies that they're partnered with. And I think when I was going through interviews last year and like going through applications, what I did essentially was just have a list of like all the companies that really struck out to me, and
Mhm.
like learn more about like what it is that they value, what it is
Yeah.
that, what kind of products are they working on, what, if anything, what therapeutic areas are they working on,
Yeah.
you know, to see like what it is that kind of like piques my interest, but also like I also wanted to stay as open as possible because I thought more so from the perspective that it's not necessarily about like what the therapeutic area is for me, but more so like the functional area itself. So for
Yeah.
me, I knew that I wanted to mainly get a fellowship in regulatory affairs, regardless of
Mm.
therapeutic area, because
Gotcha.
because essentially, right, being in that being in that functional area, like being in that fellowship, the
Yeah.
skills that you get, will transfer to whatever position or like whatever therapeutic area you go into. Like they
Mhm.
follow pretty much similar concepts and similar
Yeah.
procedures. So like, for me, it was about getting the skills needed. And so that really opened my like opened my eyes to like going to apply to like the different areas like USC,
Yeah.
along with the New Jersey and Boston sites. So, doing that homework early on to know like what the programs are and like what it is that they have,
Yeah.
duration as well, because for me, mine, of course, is a 1 year fellowship. So,
Yeah.
that was something that also kind of like struck out to me. That was like
Yeah.
eye popping as well when I applied.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, like once you've done that research, then it's about like getting all like the materials that you need,
Yeah.
reading up on like, what it is that each program requires. Because not necessarily each program has like the same type of format in terms of like how you submit your application. So that is
Mhm.
something that also is like, part of that homework, seeing like what it is that they require,
Yeah.
how many letters of rec do they require, what kind of cover letter, what kind of like letters they require, you
Yeah.
know, and then just yeah, once like doing all that, it just came down to like submitting those applications and then just preparing for interviews. So and that's like the half of the story, and then the interview is like the next half, where like then like all throughout like that period of after submitting those interview or submitting those applications, it's
Mm.
just constant interview preparation,
I know.
with people who I reached out to, and a couple friends as well who are also going into fellowships as well.
Yeah.
From there, you get yourself prepared for these fellowships and or for these interviews,
Yes.
and just pray for the best and luckily,
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
How much? So how? I think that you touched on something that's really important. Having that network and that support and preparing and mock interviewing. How important or how instrumental was that for you in your journey? Like, do you recommend, like, should anyone go through this alone? I guess is like what my question is, because people really, there's like this weird sense of isolation that can come from being involved in the journey. There are some of your friends are going through it, but it's like I tell people, when you build a community around the journey, it just makes it like a little less difficult.
Mhm.
So for someone who actually went through it this way, I can always talk about the residency route, but what are your thoughts on, like, finding a buddy or a mentor? Like, what was that support process, or your recommendation on how people can get that external support for the resilience factor that comes into this?
Yeah, of course. It just speaking in general, it's like super important. Like,
Yeah.
being able to have a support system like during that process was like it honestly helped keep me like insane because
Yeah.
it gets the whole fellowship process is a marathon. You're going
Yes.
you're going day by day, week by week,
Yeah.
months of just constant interviews, and so and
Mhm.
depending on it, you can sometimes say to yourself, like, you can get discouraged, especially like once, like, people have already moved on past you to like other
Yeah.
candidates. Of course, that can seem a little bit discouraging for like for
Mm.
anybody, right?
Yeah.
And so, what has helped and essentially is, I think one thing, of course, is if you have friends who are also like-minded as you and also going into the same pathway of trying to do a fellowship, it helps to, of course, like have that group, just to be able to bounce off ideas, I think, and
Mhm.
essentially like talk about like what it is that everyone's going through. Because at the end of the day, like everybody's trying to get a fellowship,
Yeah.
so everybody's qualified to get a fellowship. And
Yeah.
so it's all about like trying to support one another when needed, and I think as well, like I was fortunate of to have like a coach,
Yeah.
because I actually did pills. So I was
Yeah.
part of the pills coaching program,
Mhm.
and I was given a mentor slash coach who helped me like during those time periods of like CV review, a couple
Mhm.
mock interviews, and having him be someone who was like a fellow as well, you know,
Yeah.
and it was very essential, like to be able to talk to him on the weekly to talk about like how things are going, like what
Yeah.
I can improve on if I feel discouraged.
Mhm.
And I think it just starts with, of course, just reaching out to people who are fellows now,
Mhm.
and seeing like, is there any way like you can, help me with this if need
Yeah.
be. And of course, it just takes like sometimes that one talk with someone who can like really help spark that, moment for you to like, really get moving like through the interview.
Yeah. It I mean, it's so important, and I think people who've never really had, like, really great mentorship underestimate the power that, like, somebody who's on the outside looking in,
Mhm,
and their ability to tell you, like, "Look, you have what it takes. It was just one bad day, but, like, this is going to be okay." And, like, this person doesn't know you, they don't owe you anything. The only thing that they have to offer you is just encouragement and believing in your potential. And I think, like, you touched on something super important, like having someone there, that you could really rely on and trust. Like, that trust factor of, this person is here and they're looking out for my best interest. That
mhm.
alone could be like a huge boost for anybody mentally. I'm glad that you were able to have that. So for people that are interested in getting where you are, but they're like super scared, is it okay if they reach out to you?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I always have to cover that because like they're all just like, I don't know. You didn't ask them if it's okay for us to message them. So I always have to ask. Otherwise, someone always inboxes me to say that I didn't ask if it was okay for them to reach out. So I have to ask. And yes, he is okay with you reaching out to him. And is LinkedIn the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, so
Very
LinkedIn,
good.
you can just instant message me, and I'll be able to see your message to reply.
Very good. My last question that I have for you. I know you're busy. I always tell you guys, I'm not going to hold you forever. I want you to share one big lesson, like your wisdom from your very successful journey. And of course, we wish you all the best as you continue on. But what is one piece of advice like for the people that are in it right now? Like they are in round two, they're in round three, they're in finals. What do you have to offer them as wisdom from a person who did it successfully?
Yeah, I would say, you know, if you're going through those rounds, just keep going. First
Yeah.
and foremost, it can seem tiring. One thing that like, especially during like probably at this point, like when I was interviewing, I started to feel like a little bit robotic in terms of like my interview responses. And
Yeah.
so like, one thing of course to help with that is just making sure that you're taking time to like, just, have a mental break for yourself. And like
Mhm.
the weekends or, even like your days off, just taking that time to, you know, step away just real quickly from like the whole interview process and just, give yourself like a mental reset. And
Yeah.
that way to essentially help you get through those next rounds. So that
Mhm.
way, like, you'll be essentially able to, show that energy that you first had
Yeah.
when you were like doing first rounds. And I think as well, just, knowing that you're going to get through, knowing if you're going through like, first rounds and moving on to seconds and thirds, I think just having that time to, of course, reflect on those, specific interviews. So like, let's
Yeah.
say it's second rounds, like taking that time to reflect on how well you think you did,
Yeah.
seeing, okay, you thought you did good, right? Ask yourself like the next question, like what can I do for the next round to really make it to the next part? Because it's
Yeah.
going to be a new interview, with new people, and
Mhm.
so you want to make sure that like you solidify that. So just taking that time to reflect on like what it is that went well this round. You've moved on to the next. What's the next plan? And just having
Yeah.
forth.
Absolutely. These are really, really great. Take a break. It really is okay. It
Definitely.
really is okay to take a deep breath and take a break and celebrate your wins. If you get around two, it's a win. Take a break, but also reflect to see how you can continuously find your areas of improvement. Thank you so much, Rizak, for an amazing, amazing session. And per usual, all of these sessions are recorded. They will be here on LinkedIn for you, and as well as the YouTube channel at ResiPrep 360. You'll have access to them. I want to thank you again so much for your time and be respectful of your time because I know you're super busy. But thank you. If you're watching us live, thank you so much for joining us. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but he's free to inbox him on LinkedIn. He's super responsive, I promise. And he'll get back to you quickly. I can speak to that myself. But thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday evening.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Bye bye.
Bye.